Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Prepper Podcast. And this week, I'm honored to be joined by Krzysztof from Domowy Survival. I hope I'm saying
Yeah,
all of
that's
that
correct.
right.
Yeah, if I was born in the UK, it would be called like household survival or
Yeah.
dwelling survival, which is a bit challenging because people associate with like household chores or figuring out the best way to, I don't know, clean your mirrors, right? But it's not the case. I mean, it is a blog about prepping.
Excellent. Okay.
But we are focusing on what we like to call of the modern survival, like being prepared for all the emergencies and not the traditional way of thinking of traditional survivalism. I mean, being able to set up a fire with only 2 sticks and a handful of other things,
Yeah.
in case you get lost in the wilderness, because it's not that often in Poland.
Right. Not that often here either. The wilderness isn't big enough. Well,
Yeah.
we'll start about asking about yourself first,
Mhm.
and then we'll go into Domowy Survival after that.
Sure.
So, for the audience sake, where are you from?
So we're located in Poland. I was born and raised in Poland. I'm 41. And it's actually a really interesting story. I mean, not at least interesting for me because I love telling it about how we started. But so the whole idea of the blog was to tell people about how they can get prepared. But I started being interested in that in around 1999 when I was in high school, because I'm 41. So yeah, it was 1998 or 1999. I played a game called Fallout, and it had the world in the game was like a parallel universe where there was a nuclear war in 2077, and people still were able to live through the apocalypse, the nuclear apocalypse, the fallout, and so on. And back then I started to realize that actually people in the US are getting ready for that kind of scenario for the last 50 years during the Cold War, right? And it is actually doable. You can survive something like that. And starting from there, I learned that you can build a fallout shelter in your own backyard, and that you can you would need to spend only several weeks in it, not years, not whole generations. And then it started I started getting interested in, when I started my family, it was like 2008, I think I got married. So I started getting prepared, like financially, because I always hated the possibility of being laid off, I think is the right.
Laid off. Yeah.
Okay, so I was worried I'm gonna get laid off at some point, so I had to have like some savings to keep my family afloat. And then it also eventually I started figuring out how to get some food stored, for the same reason, because as I could be left out with no income, there could also be some issues with food availability, and so on and so forth. I'm here. Still, I do not believe that I'm prepared for everything, because I doubt that it's even possible at all to feel really safe. But I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
So is there so one of the questions I usually ask is well, the first question I ask is, are you a prepper? Do you class yourself as a prepper? Because
I
there's
do.
different categories, there's survivalist, homesteaders, things like that. Would you say a prepper?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to be living in a homestead, but I'm living in a city block, in an apartment. I don't have much space for my prepper activities. I would love to live somewhere far from the city, because I'm living in the biggest city in Poland, in Warsaw, actually quite close to all the major targets if it comes to nuclear war, right? Like the airport and all the communication centers and so on.
Yeah.
So I would love to move there, but my perspective is that you have to balance like all the issues that you will be facing. Like, for example, in Poland, living in in the countryside makes it a bit more challenging to raise up your kids with a lot of opportunities. I mean, because you would have to be spending like an hour or so every day to driving them here and there for after school activities, which is challenging. So for now, I'm living in the city. Eventually, I will probably move elsewhere.
I think every prepper's dream is eventually to be a homesteader or a country, right? It's never
That's right.
it's not usually as easy as we think. But so
Definitely.
is nuclear war the focus of your preps? Is that what you're like? When I prep, I'm prepping for everything, but generally the Carrington event and a solar flare was one of the main reasons. So is
Well,
nuclear war your main?
I try to focus not on the scenarios that would be causing issues, but I try to focus to keep my family, to be able to feed my family and provide them with all the things that they need, no matter what's going on. Because it doesn't really matter if it's going to be a war, like in the traditional meaning of the word, like in Eastern Ukraine, or a war, or the Carrington event, or EMP, or anything like that, solar flare, right? It could be also a blackout, at least in Poland, which has not that great energy grid, which means that we might be facing some blackouts because of the weather, the temperature being too high for the power plants to function. So it doesn't really matter, because the effects of this scenario would be probably the same, right? Or at least similar in many ways, because you would not have any water, obviously no power, but no running water. The food supply would be not available anymore. So it's not that important. Obviously, when the bombs are falling, right, and there's a huge cloud of nuclear fallout coming our way, it is somewhat different. But in other terms, in all the other terms, I believe that most of the scenarios can be summed up to the most basic necessities that you need to have available, or have a way of obtaining them. Because you cannot store enough water, barely enough water, right? Never. It's not possible. You would have to build like a 2 or 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools to have enough water for a year for a family. So it's
always a way to filter instead of store is the best.
I think that in Poland it's even quite challenging to get the water from anywhere to your house, because I'm always joking that most of the Polish families have 2 buckets. One is used as a bin for all the refuse, right? And the other one is used to wash your floors, and none of them are clean enough to be used for potable water. So you have to have some containers, or at least like a plastic bag that's used for cabbage fermentation. So for the sauerkraut, right? So then you can put it into the dirty bucket and then fill it with water. It's not going to be contaminated.
Yeah. So there's always got to be that thought of, because you can never store enough water. I mean,
obviously,
I know people do have a lot of containers, but you know, even if you're a homesteader, there's going to be, if you're going to run out if you don't have a constant source
eventually.
Can I ask? Oh well, on November the 15th, 2022, a missile struck Polish territory. By accident, or was a Ukrainian one, or whatever you believe the story was, killing 2 people. In the media since then, what we've seen since 2022 is that Poland's getting ready for war. They're increasing their military size. Are you seeing that there?
Yes, to some extent, because the whole missile incident was not really difficult in terms of many casualties, right? But it was a good chance for the Russian propaganda to be poured to the Polish media. Not all of them, but some of them are more right-wing leaning, and for some weird reason, I'm not sure why, but right-wing organizations are. There are no proofs that they are sponsored by the Kremlin, but it might be indicated by how they are acting, right? So it was, we are definitely spending a lot of money to buy arms like tanks and helicopters. I think it was announced that we're buying like 96 Apache helicopters, which is going to be the second biggest fleet of Apache helicopters in the world, which is insane. Because on the other hand, we don't really have enough people to maintain them or even to fly them at the moment, right? But what is challenging, I think, is the fact that we had like I'm not sure how it's called in English, but we were able to be conscripted. There was conscription, like you were supposed
national service,
if you were a male, if you were a male, you were supposed to go to the military for a year when I finished my studies. But if you were studying on the university or stuff like that, you were not part of it. You had you were laid off. I mean, not
exempt. You were exempt.
You were exempt. This is the word I was looking for. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So you were exempt of it, and then after a while, it basically stopped. So we only have the people that enlisted on their own, and it is probably not enough people. So we might be facing with a discussion what to do about it, because I believe, like personally, I believe that if we were to build something like that again, it needs to cover both sexes. to the same extent like in Israel, because we will probably be facing an enemy that is much more, much bigger in numbers, Russia, of course.
Yeah.
So then it would be wise if every young person in Poland was able to at least do some basic stuff, because we don't have enough time and infrastructure to keep all those people for a whole year. But I think we will be able to give them like 6 or 9 or 10 weeks of training, of really basic training, so that they could be enlisted and trained even more. So it is somewhat challenging, and people are, I think that people are somewhat afraid, but I believe that the most people are afraid of not the war of itself, but rather how it's going to affect the civilians, right? Because we believe here that the Russia that claimed to have the second biggest army in the world, right, has the second best army out of the third world countries. So they are not even able to conquer the Ukraine, which personally made me feel much more secure, much safer, because I finally understood 2 years ago that we were maybe afraid of Russia a bit too much as compared to what they are actually capable of. And because of that, I think that we are much safer now, but they might rebuild their potential in next, say, 5 years from now, right? And then the Baltic countries and Poland would be facing some threats from them.
And it's
really
that constant
difficult.
threat of that access of a group of them. If you've got Chinese backing, if you've got North Korea weapons coming in there, that's where the increased threat comes from, right?
Definitely, yeah, that's right.
So what's the government doing there to prepare the people? I know in 2022
not much.
Well, same here, but I know in 2022 the Polish government produced a survival guide in case of war. I don't know if it's as in-depth as our one was from the Cold War, where it was said, oh, just hide under your desk and cover your head. Or our recent advice that have said, make sure you stock 3 days worth of food. I mean, I don't know what that's going to do for anyone. But what's the government doing for the people? Do you have shelters that are available if they come to that? Anything?
No, we don't. Actually, we don't, because we had a lot of them built during the Cold War, right, by the communist government, and most of them are not available anymore. Me personally, I was raised up in a neighborhood where we had those pretty distinct small buildings, like 4 walls, a roof, and 4 openings. It was basically an escape route for the underground shelter, and it was also used for ventilation. So it's a quite distinct image of this type of a building. And we had something like that. I think it was under my preschool, like kindergarten. That was like outside of my windows. I could see the kids playing, right? So my neighborhood had those buildings, and we don't right now. There was a great effort made in the last 2 years. They sent the fire departments to go and scout people's basements and underground garages, and they claimed that most of them are capable of becoming a shelter, but only shelter in case of a, say, hurricane or something like that, which is not that common in Poland. So we could, in theory, shelter most of the population in Poland, but not from the really difficult threats like the nuclear blast or nuclear
nothing
fallout.
Direct.
Nope.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same here. Very few people have basements and cellars in the UK, and it's and everything from the Cold War era has just been left to go completely dilapidated. And what there is left, I have no doubt, will be reserved for the people that are in the right place, right?
Definitely.
They'll look after themselves first.
Yeah, well, it will take us probably like 20 years to build something that is similar to what Finland has, or say Switzerland, that is able to host a significant fraction of the Polish population. There are some ideas to allow people to build such buildings on their own without many of the paperwork that would be needed, which is helpful. I myself I'm trying to convince people to build an underground buildings to store food, and then eventually be able to use them in case of other emergencies. But it's not that common. It is quite expensive, so we're not doing that. Actually, we had a second line of underground built in Warsaw, right? Recently, it is still being developed. There additional lines are also in progress, and all the entryways are covered with beautiful glass constructions. Even I might even call them sculptures, right? But they are going to be changed in a matter of a millisecond into a huge shrapnel bomb when something explodes over it, killing people inside, right?
Yeah.
So I am not even sure why we're not considering putting some concrete over it and not glass, which obviously would not look as great, but would be much better in terms of the sheltering people. We are trying to rebuild the civil defense because it's non-existent, basically, because of some there was a law that regulated how the civil defense was acting, or was supposed to be funded and was supposed to operate, and then this specific piece of law was removed from the existence, and nothing in its place was introduced. So there was a void of some kind. So right now we are trying to rebuild it, because obviously we need people to be in the trenches shooting at the Russians, right? But on the other hand, we need people away from the trenches, cleaning up all the destruction that's going to be caused by Russian missiles and so on. So we don't have neither of those. And on top of that, we have very little firearms in Poland. We have like 3 or 5 pieces of guns per 100 people in Poland, which is probably the lowest or the second lowest number in the whole Europe. The law concerning that changed in 2011, which allowed people to get guns for the sporting purposes and for the collection purposes. We had something like that in the past as well, but back then, before 2011, the police was, which is issuing the permits, they were given a flexibility, a freedom of choice. I mean, they could give you a permit, but we're not obliged to give you a permit. And right now, since 2011, they are obliged to give you a permit if you fulfill pretty straightforward conditions, like for the shooting, for the sports purposes, being part of a sports club, which is obvious, right? Having what's called I'm not sure how it's called in English, but basically having a document that states that you went through an exam that proved that you know the law and know how to safely handle the firearm.
Like some sort of safety training.
Definitely, that's exactly that. And you had to be of good health and be a good citizen, stuff like that, right? Which is quite, I would say it is reasonable, right? So, and then if you fulfill those criteria, you will definitely get the permit, no matter what they might want to, if they wanted to give it to you or not. And since then, a lot of new people are getting gun permits in Poland, but it's still not enough. And besides that, we are all worried or convinced that all the guns will be confiscated when anything happens, because we had those issues in the past, like when it was the martial law in 1981. All the civilians had to get rid of their guns. They had to simply deliver them to the nearest police station, and they had to be kept there. So it's not something that would probably do anything meaningful for the security potential of the Polish families in case of anything.
So it'd be like an amnesty where you have to hand them in, and obviously if they're all registered, they know where you are anyway, right?
And what's also challenging is the fact that not only probably the Polish government knows where all the gun permit owners are. Probably Russians know it already, so you would probably end up in a street with your hands tied behind your back and your skull with a hole from a 7.62 by 25 bullet. But it is what it is.
Yeah, not the place you want to be.
Definitely.
So how's prepping in general viewed in Poland? Obviously in America it's starting to get quite mainstream, and we've all seen them on YouTube and things. In the UK it's a very fringe group. Well, how's it viewed in Poland?
Well, in the 80s it was a necessity, because back then when we had the communist government, we were lacking basically everything. Like, if you were able to obtain the toilet paper, you were buying a lot of it and then storing it for a year. You would be able to buy a 1 year supply when it finally was available, right? And then you stored it for the eternity. So it was a necessity back then. We made our own food supply for the winter. Like, we canned We
Yeah.
had a lot of we did a lot of things like my mother was sewing our pants for me and my siblings for some time because it was difficult to buy them in this, but you could buy the cloth and then do it yourself. So back then it was a necessity and everybody did it. But then when the communist government fell and the capitalism started in Poland, we finally were able to free ourselves of thinking about storing things for the future because everything was readily available. And it is right now, even as we speak. But I think that the COVID pandemic and also the war in Ukraine changed our focus a bit, because I not only run the blog, but I also have a small online shop focusing on preppers and I sell like food supply. And we had a lot of new customers back in 2020, 2022. And what was the most challenging for me was when I was getting a call from like small hospitals somewhere in Poland because I had listed that I have the air respirators.
Okay.
The face masks, the FFP something face mask, right? And everybody was trying to get a hold of them because we did not have enough. And it was the most challenging for me because I had to answer all those calls and tell those people, no, I don't have anything I can sell you. Even if I had some of my own, I would donate it right to the hospitals, but I had none. But I think it's more like we're either doing it full scale, so everybody's doing it, so you cannot buy anything, or you're not doing it at all. So it's not something that is well thought out and doing that the families are doing slowly, buying something every month, right?
Yeah.
But you're either doing it at once and everybody's doing it at the same time, or nobody's doing it at all, with maybe an exception of, say, 100,000 people in Poland that would consider themselves preppers.
But because of that recent history, and because that's so, I say recent, it's recent as far as I'm concerned. Because of that recent history, is it less frowned upon then? People don't judge you as much for being a prepper?
Well, back like 6 or 8 weeks ago, the Polish Minister of Defense told everybody that they have their own backpacks, rescue backpacks, something like that, right? The guy told us that he built it when he was visiting Ukraine, and it is still packed and ready to go. So it is a bug out bag of sorts. But we have a history in 1939 when the Polish government was in fact evacuated abroad when the war just started. Yeah. So most common connotation people made in their heads was, okay, so he's getting ready to be evacuated in case of war, which is insane, right? Because everybody should have something like that. And it's not only for the case of evacuation from a city in case of a war, right? But it's also going to be used in case of a blackout, if there's a flood, if there's any reason that forces you out of your home, like it's you're having a fire there, right? You will grab it and leave your apartment, you leave your home and then move elsewhere, and you need to have it. But there's this understanding, or it was somehow fueled by the Russian troll farms. It is also possible that they put some money in it to incite people into believing that it's not actually something worth having.
Right. Okay. So there's a lot of conspiracy over there as well. There's
and I hate it. I hate it because I don't believe in basically any conspiracy theories, right? But it was proven in the past that some of the media influence was actually sponsored by the Kremlin, by the Russia, which caused a lot of people not to get vaccinated in Poland. Some people also do not want to support Ukrainians because we are sending them some military equipment like tanks, and I think we sent them some fighter jets back in the day, like last year or so. And there is some part of the Polish nation that does not want to support them anymore. And we don't really know why, because we received a lot of support when we were moving abroad in case of when there was this communist regime right now, right? And also during the war. So we should be giving it back, I think, but it's not the case.
It's the opinion's very divided there, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a small minority, but very loud minority that does not want to support Ukraine.
Right.
And I don't believe that these are people of a right mind. But but let's stop at that.
Yeah, let's stop at that. I like that one. Right, tell me about Domowy Survival. Tell me about the website. Obviously, you've got the website. You've got, which is here. You've got this is the English Instagram, if I'm right, because it's Dwelling Survival.
We thought about having it in the English version as well. So there is a domain, but there's not a lot of content there.
Yeah.
But the Instagram handle was done to be used in both language versions.
Yeah, and this was the most impressive, the YouTube account, because I could see hiding behind you on the shelf a little play button there.
It is there, yeah.
Yeah.
So
over 100,000 subscribers.
We have like 118 or 17,000 people. We lost 25,000 people when we started speaking frankly about the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, because
you can't please everyone.
Yeah, and I always wanted to be true to myself, right? I wanted to be able to look myself to look at myself in the mirror and not feel humiliated by something I was saying and not believing. So so it's a cost of being true to yourself. So the Domowy Survival was established in 2010, I think, by my colleague, and I only worked there part-time. I was contributing some articles, and then eventually when we decided that it needs to have a face, I mean, because we wanted to start publishing some videos, which happened in 2014, I think in 2014, actually in summer 2014. So it's 10 years ago, basically. We started producing like one video every week, and we are trying to do our best to do it till this day, basically one video a week. And I think that the most important driver of the growth of the channel was the war and also the pandemic to some extent, because people were trying to figure out how to make their own disinfection fluid, right?
Right.
When they couldn't obtain it. And on the other hand, well, what I find the most challenging is the fact that most people that are preppers, I think, do not trust the government, which is not bad of itself, because it's understandable that you feel that the government is not going to be able to come to your rescue, right? They will not be able to provide the support we need. There's not going to be enough of it. It's not going to happen soon enough after the catastrophe of any kind. So it is reasonable to not trust the government. But on the other side of things are people that are really sitting in their tinfoil hats basically 24/7 because they are afraid the government is trying to sell them. Yeah, like the Elon Musk is probably trying to, no, sorry, not Elon Musk. Bill Gates is trying to depopulate Earth by using vaccines, and probably is going to like control their minds using the graphene that's in the vaccines or whatever the most recent conspiracy theories. And I understand that people are afraid of the vaccines, because I believe that there was not enough there was a lot of propaganda that tried to convince people to get the shot, right? But it was, I think that nobody had any meaningful discussion with people. Nobody addressed their concerns. We were told that they are going to be 100% safe, right? Which is not doable. It was never doable.
Without long-term studies, how could they possibly
exactly.
claim that?
So it was.
They should have just been honest and said, "This might be a bit of a risk, but it's less of a risk than."
Definitely, yeah, and it was always the case. And right now, people are saying, "Okay, so they lied to us because they said it's going to be 100% safe." Even though that the studies show that if you got the vaccine, you were much safer than if you did not get it and had the COVID and then the long-term effects of it. But we can talk about it for ages. It's not going to change anything, basically. So I think that those two scenarios, which I was not really being prepared for, like specifically for war or the pandemic, they changed how people perceive the reality, because they understand that the fact that they can buy, like, one of the things that was out of the shops when the pandemic started was yeast, because people started baking. Nobody was baking their own bread, but then everybody started. So it was gone in a matter of a couple of days when it all started. So why was that the case? Not sure. Nobody stored it, but so everybody had to buy it, and then it was gone.
And it's amazing how quickly people forget that
Yeah.
happened, and they go back
Yeah.
to this instant. I'll just buy
When war
shopping
started
for a
in
week.
2022 in February, everybody ran to buy some petrol, even
Right.
if they had it.
Panic buy.
Yeah, panic buy.
Yeah.
So and preppers will do the same. Preppers will also be part of those queues trying to buy petrol or yeast or flour or whatever, even though they have it. Or at least they should have it, right?
You can always
They
have
will also
more.
definitely. And you don't want to be left out, right? You also don't want to make your neighbors think that you have it. So then, because you have it, you didn't go to buy it, and then they can steal from you, right? Yeah.
I don't care what my neighbours think. I wasn't queuing up for an hour for a bag of pasta during the pandemic. I've just lost a bit of focus there. There we go. It was crazy times, but it brings me on to my next question for you, really, because a lot of preppers, I mean, if you've done it for as long as you have, you'll know, will prep for theoretical situations. Like the Americans will look at potential EMPs, and a lot of their prepper fan fiction and stuff like that is based around that.
Prepper porn.
Yeah, there you go. Prepper porn. That's the way to say it. But it's all based around that. And then you'll have different people. Like I prep for the solar flares, the Carrington event, things like that. How did the sudden realization of potential ground war change the way the prepping community was looking at things? Because if you're prepping for something completely out there and all of a sudden there's a real threat, did you have to change your mindset?
Yeah, I think a lot of people had, because there's a common, I think, misconception that you should have everything available in your home in the case of an emergency, right? Like the blackout. It's obviously easier to live through a blackout if you have everything available nearby. But it's not a good strategy if you need to evacuate. And you're not willing to, if you're not willing to evacuate, then you're risking your life for basically what? For the stuff you have stored?
Cans of
worth
beans.
more? Yeah, is it worth more than your life? When there was some riots in the US, and 3 or 4 years ago, I had a discussion with my fans. I posted a video when I tried to convince them, in case of riots, you need to evacuate. You will not be successful in securing your household from the flood of people that are trying to destroy it, and then in the process hurt you, right?
Yeah.
And the same goes for war or for fire or for flood. You're not able to secure yourself. I mean, secure your belongings to keep them safe from a flood. So you need to evacuate. And the same goes for war. If you don't want to be killed, you need to evacuate as soon as the army leaves and the foreign armies coming your way, because you will die other way.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people do say, "Oh, I'd only ever bug in. Bug in's the only option." But something like that with war, especially in a city, a major town, anything like that, you've no choice. You don't bug in when there's bombs falling all around you, right?
Exactly. or you bug in for eternity, right? You simply get.
Did it change directly for yourself how you prepped, or do you think you were already prepping for this?
I always had a bug out location of some sorts. It is quite common in Poland to have a second house to spend some time in the summer outside of the city. Maybe it's not that common, but a lot of people have it. So my family had it as well, and my strategy was always to go there. And because of the fact that we had it for many years in the family, we spent a lot of time there. And back when we started using this place, it had no running water, so you had to use a manual pump to get the water. The only accommodation we had was electricity. So then, and it did not have any heating source, I think, even back in the 90s. So and because we were not that well situated, my family was not that well situated, we spent a lot of time in tents, basically camping, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this was a great strategy that taught me to live without all the amenities that we have, like running water. So I think that it did not change much in terms of that, because I always thought that obviously I will try to stay at my home for as long as possible, but then eventually I might be forced to move elsewhere. And I was always trying to have a place like that. Even
Yeah.
if it was only used during the summertime, we would get by in the winter as well, even though it was not that well insulated, but we would get by there.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I'll ask you a couple of questions that I've got left on my list, which I ask to everyone who joins, just, you know. So the first one is always, what do your friends and family think of you being a prepper?
Well, I'm the go-to person if they need band-aids or ibuprofen, right?
Yeah.
So they use me for that purpose. I heard a lot of time the common phrase, if something happens, we will be at your doorstep. And I
Does
always
that
laugh
worry
it off.
you?
Not that much, because I think it's easier to have additional food stored and then take people in, feed them, and in exchange have some kind of force,
A group, a mag,
a
yeah,
group
yeah,
of people
yeah,
that you can utilize for various purposes, like hauling water or firewood, right? So I'm
Human
not that worried about
shields.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's going to, like, surviving through apocalypse, I believe, will require a lot of manual labor, and I'm not willing to do it all by myself. So if I
It's a
have
good
people
idea.
helping
Yeah.
me out, I can feed them.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's good. What's the biggest mistake you've done as a prepper? Is there anything you've done like that you've prepared and you've realized?
Yeah,
Oh,
I bought a pickup truck.
okay.
as a
You went
bug out
full
vehicle.
American. You went full American.
Definitely. I was driving in a Smart that was able to accommodate 2 people back then. So having a car to fit all my family was actually an understandable idea, but it was not supposed to be a car that I never used. It was too big for my needs. It was too expensive for my needs. And I basically did not use it. I had some issues with it. It was broken for a year and a half because I was so pissed at it. I did not want to get it fixed, but eventually had to get it fixed, and I lost a lot of money. Sending it, and eventually sold it for way less than I paid for it and invested in it. So I think it was the most expensive mistake I made personally.
Wow. Yeah. A lot of thought needs to go into a vehicle. It's not just the biggest and baddest always. And the last question, what do you think gives you an edge over other preppers, if anything?
I don't think I have anything like that. I think I'm prepared a bit better than most of the people that are prepared, because I did test some things out. Like I was under the impression for some time that I'm able to evacuate from the city and walk for, say, 50 kilometers carrying a backpack, bug out bag. And I was not. And I tested it. I learned it the hard way. I was able to walk like 20 something kilometers because we made an experiment with a couple of friends of mine. We divided the whole route for 3 days. It was like 70 kilometers for 3 days. And the first day we made like 25 kilometers. And the next day I was not able to walk, basically, because my ankles hurt me so much. And then I spent a year trying to get my health in order. I basically started walking every day from the office to my home. It was like 6 or 8 kilometers, depending on the road I took. And I did it every day for a year. And then I recreated the experiment, and I was able to do it then. But I'm still not convinced that this is the way to go, because I can do it by myself, right? If I have to carry my kids, if I have to carry all the stuff, will not be able to do it. So I bought a trailer for my bike, so then I can put the weakest link in the chain onto the bike trailer, right, and then carry them with me, which would be much better. So I think that what gives me a bit of an edge is the fact that I did test most of the theories that I praise, and it was really an eye-opening event for me personally. It really caused me to refocus my preparations and rethink my whole strategy. I even moved from one place to the other simply to be closer to the place to be closer to the bug out location, so that I can make it on foot there. It did work. I never used it, but I think that right now my strategy is much more sound, much more foolproof.
I'm a constant advocate on this channel of practice. And at the second week in September, I've got 110 kilometers to walk in 4 days. Similar sort of experiment. So you've not filled me with much optimism. Hopefully I can walk on the second day.
Well, funny thing was that I was not ever a person that was traveling, walking with a backpack. And I had this understanding that it's something that's easy to do, right? It's not that challenging if you do it, if you get used to it, if you have your backpack fitted the right way, if you load it up the right way. And I carried like 6 liters of water, which was insane, right? But it was my understanding that this is the way to go. And it was not. So I keep my fingers crossed, because I fully agree with what you just said. You definitely need to test whatever you think you're doing for the purpose of getting prepared. If you buy something and not use it, it's worthless. If you buy something and then start using it, and then you learn that it's not the right tool for the job, because you have, like, in terms of electric equipment, you have like one cable not enough. You have one cable missing that is required to keep it in order. Then you basically have something that you spent a lot of money on it, and it's worthless. So you need to test everything that you get prepared.
And you don't want to be learning when a crisis is happening. That's the worst time to learn these things, because there's no ringing up customer service, and there's no returning it to Amazon after SHTF.
And your wife is going to be nagging because you bought it, you spent so much money, and you don't know how to use it. How is it possible, right?
Yeah, Josh should nag anyway, even if I didn't know how to use it. Right, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here, Krzysztof. Don't forget, guys, go and check out the YouTube channel. There is English speaking content as well. I'm right in saying that. Yeah.
I'm trying to put some captions to all the videos, so then using the auto translate feature, it should be understandable for the English speakers, I think. I tested it myself, so it's not that bad.
Yeah, but there's loads of content on there, loads of helpful advice. And I think personally, from watching it myself, it translates better to UK prepping than watching some of these American channels. I think it's a similar sort of culture where it does translate a lot closer to what we do as well.
I think we have some very similar obstacles in Poland and in the UK as compared to the Americans that have much more freedom, so they can do whatever they want. We are much more constrained, which is challenging, but it incites some new ideas, right, to overcome those obstacles.
Well, this is it. Yeah, we adapt and we persevere. That's the way to do it.
That's right.
Yeah. Right. If there's nothing else, if you'd like to say goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you. It's always interesting to be able to share what I understand, what I learned in the course of the years that I'm prepping with other audiences. So it's great. It was a pleasure talking to you.
And you too as well. Don't forget, guys, go and subscribe to Domowy Survival, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.
Take care.
Yeah.